Family Hammer. Good evening everyone and welcome to tonight's Finance and General Purposes meeting of Stanley Town Council. First, we receive any apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies, Dan?
We do, Chairman. We have apologies from Councillor Nair, Councillor Timby and Councillor McMahon, and not present Councillor Joyce Clark, Councillor Stevenson and Councillor Christie.
Thank you. Item number 2, do we have any declarations of interest for any items on the agenda? Ladies there.
Panic group, we're members of it. So it's item 11.
Item 11, Panic Group, Councillor Lee.
Same?
Yeah.
Any more?
Aye.
Nearly everybody.
I think Carol's got a Panic Group as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Carol, Mark, and yeah. Any more? No?
Excellent. Thank you for that. Number 3, procedure and appropriate announcements from the chair. I've got an announcement and then we'll move on now. There's also got one. I'd just like to welcome Alan Tubman for the meeting today. Alan started work on the 20th of January as the Deputy Town Clerk. Just like to invite Alan to say a few words about himself to the meeting, and then he'll also be hanging about at the end if anybody doesn't go and wants to harass him.
Yeah, thanks for that. Thank you, basically, for employers in this role of Deputy Town Clerk. Looking forward to it. Just a bit of Mark asked us to give a bit of background there about myself. I'm a local person. I'm from Stanley. I'm from the town. I've lived in the town, worked in the town most of my life. My employment background's during site council. Really started off at the council. I worked my way up through the housing department. Spent a lot of time working, managing the neighbourhood offices. So I was working sort of like delivering services out the front line into the various places, South Stanley, Canfield Plain, Moorside, Langley Park. And latterly down there I ended up being manager of the welfare team and the tenancy income. From going on from here, I mean, unfortunately I was made redundant in the big restructure that I had done there when the carbon homes thing turned up, so I was lucky enough to get this job here with yous. Looking forward to working with you all in the future, and hopefully we'll get some good things done. So next, importantly, I don't want to take too much time, but just thank everybody, particularly thank Alan, Nicola, and James have been excellent, and the people that I've met so far have all been excellent. They've all made us feel really welcome, help us fit in, help us get up to speed. Really. So, thanks everybody.
On this side.
Just the usual ones, Chairman. Obviously, we're recording the meeting. We have a member of the public over there recording the meeting. Is anyone else recording the meeting? No. And as always, please make sure your phones are off or on silent. And there was just one other thing that's been brought to my attention that some members have been receiving some spam emails from. It looks like they're from people that they know, either councillors or former council employees. If you receive an email that looks like it's from someone you know, but it isn't a Stanley Town Council address, and it's just got a link in it, please just delete it. It's spam. There's no issue with our server, but clearly someone who has a lot of our email addresses has got an issue on their own computer, and you're getting spam emails through. So I'll flag it up with ITC and make them aware, but it's, just delete the emails. If you get any suspicious emails like that, just delete the emails. We've had some that have been purportedly from Derek and Viv, who's obviously Derek Shingleton, some purportedly from Darren McMahon. Any others?
I have one from the Just for Women Centre.
Oh, one from the Just for Women. So
somebody called Chan.
So it's kind of things that look familiar, but they're not, because the rest of the email address is Mickey Mouse. So just beware of those.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on to item number 4, public participation. Oh,
I've had nothing in writing.
Can I ask a question? It's just about the warden's action. I was talking to them the other week and I was telling them about the dog mess and the mess in some of the yards in Cairo. And he says he was in the schools a lot and he doesn't have time to go out. He's just got it reported. But I've reported it to the council and the council's reported it to me. James, I think, I don't know. But it's just, I want to clarify, are they just going into schools, or are they actually supposed to go around and make sure everything's all right?
The answer is both. Obviously, the Stanley Town Council wardens have a different role to the Durham County Council ones. The Durham County Council ones are solely concerned with that kind of dirty backyards, dog fouling, littering, that sort of thing. Our ones are also tasked with community engagement and community projects. So, obviously I don't know the circumstances around when you met and spoke to our particular warden. I will follow it up. I'll speak to James and we'll follow it up through the process. Clearly, if our wardens are in the middle of doing something, which isn't inspecting dirty backyards, as long as they take the appropriate steps to make sure it gets reported through to the right people or follow it up at a later date, then that's okay. And I don't, I wouldn't think, having met the two wardens that we've got, that they would have just done nothing with it. But it's a dual role. So basically they're focused on different projects. And some of those projects will be targeted environmental enforcement, and some of them are community based. So, if you spoke to the warden when he was on his way to go and speak to someone in a school or deal with something else, then he probably wouldn't have dealt with it there and then. But I take on board what you're saying.
It's just that the yard next door to me.
Yeah.
Somebody's been doing work next door and there's stuff in it.
Yeah.
There's somebody's also fly tipped a load of stuff in it, so there's a lot of stuff in the yard now. And what I'm frightened of, is we get backed.
Did you report that to Durham County
I have
Council?
reported it to one of the councillors and
I mean, the quickest way to get it done is just to phone 03000 260000 and report it straight through into Durham County Council's call centre, because then it will get allocated to the Durham County Council warden team, who will get that job allocated to their team leader, and it will get dealt with reactively. That is the best and most effective way to deal with it. Obviously, I know that you know some members of council, but that's why I'd always recommend doing that, because then you've got a service request that's tracked on the system, and if it doesn't get dealt with, then you can tell your local county councillor, well, I've got this service request number and nothing's happened, and they can chase it up internally for you. That would be my advice.
Okay, thanks very much for your question. Okay, so we'll move on to item number 5, confirmation of minutes, which is attachment A. It's to approve as a correct record the minutes of the Finance and General Purposes Committee held on the 12th of December 2018. Seems like a long time ago. Does anybody want to say anything about the minutes? Anybody happy to approve the minutes?
Agreed.
Yeah.
I'm happy with that.
Yeah. Item number 6, accounts for payment and bank reconciliation. We have our usual attachments, which are B, C, D, E, F and G. We're asked to to consider the attached information, approve the payment of accounts and note the reconciliation for December 18. Alan, do you want to say anything about that? Why do you drink anything?
Not really, no. Unless members have any questions about anything that they want to raise, issues they want to discuss.
There's a point to raise with a new member. These are very detailed documents, and what I'd like to see is this more simple format, what you sit down with the new council. From what I can see, what I really want to look at is to see any variations, any overspend, any underspend, rather than having to throw through all the details and the numbers out at the end. So, for clarification purposes, I feel that my role as a councillor is to scrutinise the accounts and see where there's differences and identify it. I'd like to think it's a simple format to show this data rather than just having it with all the detail. So that's what I'd like to see.
Yeah, to that. We have to, the council has to approve the payments. There is no way around approving the payments. So on a month, in our current scheme of delegation, the officers obviously incur the expenditure and then you approve it retrospectively a month afterwards, with the exception of the back sheets which are checked and signed off by one of the members comes in, and usually the town mayor. The variances are reported on item 7 in the year-to-date expenditure report at attachment H. Now, it does it by nominal code. So for example, it will say in attachment H, direct salaries, there's the budget for this year, 143, whatever. There's the actual year-to-date spend, and there's the projected spend. So that shows you what we've spent in the year-to-date and what we're projected to spend. And there is an attached report which highlights variances over a certain amount. Now, I know that this has been something which has been raised a number of times about we don't need all this information, but there isn't an easy way around the fact that you have to approve the payments on a monthly basis, because you can't. It's not a function that can be delegated to an individual member. That the payments need to get approved. So at some point, you're going to have to get this list of payments and approve it.
Well, yeah, so we understand that. So, yeah, by all means, show the detail that you've got here, but you could add an additional report which highlights within that where the variance, the significant variance is any major expenditure.
But that's the next item, not item 7.
So again, when you submitted item 7, I'm going to raise the same issue about item 7. Is a simple format for item 7. I'm used to seeing a tabular form where you have a telegraph or line system where you identify major variances in terms of, if it's above a certain percentage, so we can focus in and see where there's a major underspend or where there's a significant overspend, so we're aware of where the actual money is going to. I know you do your budget monitoring report, you highlight the issues, but that's what I'm used to seeing. To me, I would find that simple, as you just made. That's what I'd like to see.
David?
Yeah, well, when you raised that, of course, I looked across at Helen, and Helen was smiling back, because this is exactly what we've asked for. And we don't need the detail to come here, but we do need detail in the subgroups, in a format that we can understand it, we can understand where it's being spent, who's spending it, and which projects it's allocated against. At the moment, it's just a list of figures, and as far as I'm concerned, if I was to spend all night here, going down each line asking what I didn't understand, would be here all night, because I don't know where it's allocated to, I don't know where it's gone. It's just in a sage accounting system, and we need a simpler system for councillors. And I made this point on Tuesday with you at our individual meeting. We need a simple system where councillors can look at something and understand where it's being spent. If it doesn't need to come to this committee, it doesn't need to go to full council, that it needs to go to a subgroup where the money's being spent, and when you agree to do a show, it's at, what's going to be spent on, and that's where we've got to get it. So we need to get the detail from here, but in the format that we can understand. And I think that the Chair of Finance should meet with Alan, who's going to be responsible for finance, particularly around the Civic Hall, and look at it and come up with a system where we can understand it, something simpler than what we've got now. There must be a way of doing it.
Carl, do you want to come in? Sorry.
John?
No, you can go first.
It was, if you have a project, an item, and you have the budget, and you see the spend, because if you're not doing F and H together, it's a bit more difficult. I've seen these in a number of formats now. But if you had a project, if you had the budget, the project, the spend to date, that would be perhaps a simpler way.
What I understand, James has got his hand up, I wants to come out. It's always been, I know this has been raised a lot of times, but it's always been about what members want in terms of because obviously against every one of these nominal codes, I can produce you a report which details all the expenditure against that nominal subheading, and I can tell you exactly what that expenditure's been spent on. But it's, if we're going to break it down into per project, then we can do that. If you want to break down the expenditure that we said on the beacons, for example, or against the miners Sunday, or whatever, we can do that. We can produce those reports. That's not difficult, but it's just we still need to report all the payments for approval individually. And there's no escaping that.
I'll bring James in next, and then I'll make
I've just lost the place. Attachment F. I just want to clarify something, Alan. I'm not sure whether I'm reading this wrong. The last direct salaries on the first page, so they should be coffee shop. Is this the full year?
Yes.
Is that just solely the wages, or would that be including any
That will be.
redundancies and things?
Off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you that. I think that's just the wages. But I mean, I could answer that question. But a trial balance is basically, it's a standard thing in accounting. What you do is you put all the debits, it's like how double entry accounting works. You put all the debits in, all the credits in, and they should all balance. So that is the whole year. So it's an ongoing thing that updates. So obviously we haven't paid anyone from the coffee shop since May, because we only operated for 1 month of this financial year. So that is that period of time. It may well include redundancies. I can find out, and I can let you know if that's a question.
Right. I think there's only Carl left.
Geez, got us eventually. I just want to reiterate, because ever since I came on here, I feel as if I really struggle with the financial information. And I do look at what other councils do as a benchmark for what we do here, and I see some of the financial reports coming through the councils, and it might be worth going away and having a look at the way other larger town councils present their financial figures to members. I mean, I sit on a couple of different governing bodies for schools and other organisations, and I get the information presented to me. Not always, it's never always been presented like that, but basically our number one job as a councillor is to scrutinise and monitor the work that's going on financially at the council, and that's our way of influencing the governance. And if you can't even understand what the expected expenditure, what the actual expenditure and what the variance is on that, exactly like Joan described, we're not doing our jobs properly. And let's be blunt about it, there's been a couple of occasions, certainly in the past couple of years, where I think the council's dropped the ball when it's come to finances. And I don't feel as a member that unless I was to go digging for it, and to really spend a lot of time, and you've got to remember everyone around these tables volunteers, unless I was to spend a lot of time digging and getting to the bottom of some of the things, that information just isn't presented in a way where I can look at it and I can provide the level of scrutiny that I need to as a member. And that's my personal opinion, but obviously it's shared by other people around here. But what worries me even more is this is one of the first things that I raised when we came back in here as a council, and other people have raised it as well, from right across the council, and we still have the same reports presented in pretty much the same way, that just make our lives very difficult. And I think that basically it needs to change, and I would suggest that we've I've certainly put off raising this over and over again, knowing that we've had some capacity issues within the council. But we've now got a deputy clerk here, and we've got the issue with the finance officer, which I know we've discussed. But I think there's no excuses and there's nowhere to hide now. This information needs to be presented in a way that's acceptable to the members around here. It needs to change. So I would hope that the Chair of Finance and Alan and yourself, Alan, can get together and thrash out a way that information can be presented. Have a look at what goes on in some of the other larger councils and get that information to us in a way that we can actually scrutinise it properly.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to come in? And hopefully you do, because we still need somebody to approve the payments and note the amount of reconciliation.
Chairman, can we have a motion about the action?
Alright, yeah.
Well, we've already had motions on it, Alan. If you go back through the minutes, there'll be motions we've passed on that before. I think we've already passed that motion that you would meet with the Chair of Finance and come up with a more acceptable way of presenting reports, and it hasn't come back. But if you want another motion to say that, I would say, can we make sure that that's actioned before the next finance meeting would be my motion. It's an absolute priority for the council.
Okay.
So anybody want to second the motion?
I'll second it.
Right, Gordon, you
I'm sorry, I said I'll accept that.
yeah, approve the payment of accounts and note the bank reconciliation. Anybody want to second that? James. So it's James. Yeah. Okay. Nobody else wants to come in? We'll move on to item number 7. Item number 7 is, I think it's part of the same discussion, to be fair. We've got our year-to-date expenditure budget report, which is attachment H, and our budget monitoring report, which is attachment I. Alan, do you want to say anything more about it?
Not particularly, no. Unless any other questions?
Anybody got any questions, stroke queries, or wants to move that we accept or don't accept the reports? Quiet.
I've got a query
Yeah.
on each.
Yeah.
Again, it could just be me, I don't understand this. Basically, what you've got on there, on page, see, I've got on page 10, you've got an explanation, there's ticket sales, non-retained, 43,554.
Yep.
There seems to be a zero in the reality is what was budgeted for, and that's under a cost code 1005. On another page, it shows the same figures, it shows ticket sales paid.
Yep.
And cost code 47.
Yep.
What is that?
That is where we are basically taking ticket sales, which are then paid over to the person who's showing us. So we have to show that it goes through our accounts, but it will always be a zero budget because we have no income expectation for it because it's not our money. We are taking it, we are banking it, we are in certain circumstances making sure that the VAT is paid on it, and then we are paying it over to the person who's putting the show on. So if you hire the hall for an event and you want us to sell tickets for you, we sell the tickets, we take the payments, we deduct the VAT if applicable, and then we pay you the money that you've earned. That's what that code is. So there's one on either side because you have to show the money coming in and the money going out. But that's what it is basically. That's how we account for that. If we didn't used to, that's something that Susan put in place. We didn't used to have it at all. We just used to basically pay it over, and it didn't really show on our accounts. But Susan said it needed to because of the VAT implications for it.
So the two on one side, and one on the other. This one will be back, and the one will be sent on.
Presume that's what it could achieve.
Well, basically, all the codes that start with 1 are like expenditure, and the 4 ones are, sorry, the other way around. The 1 codes are income codes and the 4 codes are expenditure codes. So if you've got something like that, you have to have one on either side if you've got a trading account.
Okay. David?
Can I just ask, I've never seen a VAT return in any of the things that we do. Where do we account for that? How do we look at that? Am I missing it? Am I? The VAT return? Normally make them on a monthly basis.
They're made quarterly.
Quarterly.
But it's an accounting procedure. I mean, if you want to scrutinise them, then you're more than welcome to scrutinise them. But they are made to HMRC on a quarterly basis. And if you want them to be appearing on our agenda, then they can. But they've never been asked for before.
Joe, do you want to come in next?
The VAT, I've seen the payment out, not broken down, so
Not
it's
broken
like,
down, no.
you know, however much, but not actually for what were. I actually asked a question about the very same thing, and my question was, do we not charge a fee? What do other, you know, and I don't know, you know, I don't know if the gala, you know, if they're selling tickets for somebody's show, and I don't know if they do this, then do they get a fee? You know, like, I don't know.
Yeah.
We didn't charge a fee for providing tickets.
What's the fee?
I don't know. I mean, it's.
Yeah, can I just say on that, we did agree a fee on every ticket sale. There's a percentage, a very small percentage, where when we bought the equipment, I remember saying that the fee would be charged to you, so that would help us to recover and replace it what we needed to. I remember that.
I just didn't know where it showed.
Yeah,
Do
it's
you know
like
what
a
I mean?
lot of things in there.
You know, I don't know if it's 25 tickets,
Yeah.
4 pence ticket, or do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay. Right, does anybody else want to comment on this one? Okay, so the bottom line is, the committee is requested to consider this matter and decide if any action is required. Does anybody want to suggest any action, or are we happy to move on to the next item?
Do you want to see about reports?
Well, I'm about simplifying stuff, not overcomplicating anymore, so.
Can we happy to note that?
Okay, so item number 8, strategic grants policy, which is attachment J. I'll hand over to Alan.
I'm just going to hand over to Councillor Marsh. Basically, this was an action for which came from full council for myself and Councillor Marshall to discuss what we wanted the £35,000 pot, which is going to form the strategic grants policy fund, to look like, and how it would be called out for and how it would be accessed. We had a meeting to discuss that, and from that discussion, I have drafted up this draft policy. So essentially what we're looking at here is a grants pot which will consider applications twice a year, small grants between £250 and £2,000. The conditions of the grant and the eligibility criteria, hopefully you've read through. I will read them all out if you want me to, but hopefully you've read. They are eminently reasonable, and they're there to ensure that we've got monitoring arrangements in place and that we publicise that the support we're giving to community organisations. And the proposal is that we would establish an appraisal panel, which will consist of 6 members and will meet twice a year to consider all the applications we get in each call out. The deadlines on there for the application rounds are in the policy, and then that panel will report to full council and to approve the recommendations of that panel. The policy is there. Hopefully you've read it. This is really, if there's any questions, or if Councillor Marshall would like to say anything about it.
Thanks, Sam. Does anybody want to come in on this one? John?
At the very beginning it says CDFC have also got a callback stage pilot apply for 50k for 2 years. Are we saying that they will only apply, this will only apply for 2 years? Is the trial 2 years?
Sorry, that's the next agenda item.
That's the next one, I think.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, yeah, this item 8. This is the
Yeah.
this,
Sorry.
yeah.
That's a good question for the next item.
I'm ahead of myself because I put that paper down because I'm
Okay, does anybody want to come on this one, Carl?
I think I just, a couple of things, I mean, credit where credit's due. I just want to thank Alan, because he's done a lot of work in a relatively short space of time to get this and the next agenda item back through the committee in time, so that the groups on the front line aren't going to miss out on funding opportunities for the town council. I think the policy statement, obviously this was revised just last year to fit in with and to tighten up some of the criteria and grant giving for the council. And I think most of the things from last year are still fundamental to this, but some of the tweaks have been made so that you'll notice it dovetails with the next agenda item, so that there's a nice sort of flow. So projects for smaller amounts of money that we know and we discussed in the council are really valuable through the MIFs, generally their access at the minute. So I think that it sort of covers quite a lot, and there's the ability to fund quite a lot of groups. But I think at the core of this, it's ease of access for community organisations to apply to, and sort of to try and make it a sort of very unbureaucratic process, both externally and internally, whilst making sure the council gets the recognition for the difference we're making to the community. So if it's approved, it'll then go on and it'll be a £35,000 a year allocation of money to grassroots community organisations right across the Stanley area.
Thanks, Carl. Anybody else want to come in on this one? Good. It says committee is requested to consider the draft policy and decide if any changes are required. Has anybody got any mind any changes, or is everybody happy with it? hands in the air, so it looks like we're all happy with it. Okay, so
So we recommend that council adopts the policy.
Yep.
Okay, number 9, dovetailing nicely, I'll just storm that off somebody. The Stanley Fund update, which is attachment K. I'll give an update on his meeting and the paper.
Okay, yes, yeah, I'm not going to say dovetail again, because we don't know. But obviously, the other part of the new grant funding strategy was that we'd have the small grants policy, which we just looked at, and then we would be seeking to establish this Stanley Fund in partnership with County Durham Community Foundation. And I was tasked with speaking to the Community Foundation to look at to try and rough out what the terms of reference would look like for that and how the fund would operate in practice, so that we could actually give guidance to CDCF so they can actually put the detail, the meat on the bones, if you like. So you've all had this report from our meeting with the recommendations that we've made. There's some information in there about the amount of money which has been allocated and other sources of funding which are being explored by CDCF at the moment. And then we've got in there some outlines for the makeup of the board, what that would look like, and there's a decision point on there for members. What they're proposing the call-outs would look like, what the applications of monitoring would look like, and then there's a few questions about do members think the proposed limits of 2k to 10k are right? Would you consider a higher limit or going beyond it in certain circumstances? And if so, what would those circumstances be? Would you be happy to fund multi-year packages with the appropriate safeguarding? And what would be the maximum length? And they suggested 3 years. What the qualifying criteria for the fund would be? Bear in mind that other funders will have an input into that as well, so they will get to add their own priorities on. But I've taken ours from the pledges which were put into the medium-term plan as being priorities, if they're right or if anything else needs to go in. A question about regeneration that was raised by CDCF, which members could give a steer on. And then if members are happy, subject to any input with this as an outline, then CDCF are aiming to bring back the detailed terms of reference for consideration by the full council at the end of the month. Hopefully, if we can meet that timeline and we can get these right, and council can approve them, then we can actually launch the funding strategy in time for April the 1st when the new financial year starts.
Thanks, Alan. We'll take John's question next, because seeing you've already asked it. Is it the bit just below where it tells you what the funders are?
Yes. So is it, what I'm saying is this a trial for 2 years? Are we saying we'll look at it again in 2 years?
I think what they're saying is they've got funding for 2 years.
Yeah, what item 1 is talking about is confirmed funding. So the bolded ones are confirmed funding. There's our money, there's Ron Hogg's money, there's the money from the local MP and the local businessman, and there's the money that CDCF have committed to put in themselves. Those are all confirmed. And then there are the other bits are talking about what this is a pilot to communities funds from the National Lottery Community Fund, and they've got through the first stage of applications on that. So that funding would be a 2-year pilot, after which we'd have to see what happened. But obviously, they're in conversation with local businesses. They're making an introduction with local AAP, and that's happened. I've spoken to Daniel about that, and that will get taken forward through the AAP. And so that's just giving you information about other sources of funding they're looking at the moment. What we said, or what they said, was that in the initial year, we would contribute 50,000 and the fund would pay out 100,000. And CDCF have confirmed that that's achievable. And obviously the idea is that as we go through this process, we then get other funders on board, contribute to it, and hopefully grow the fund bigger than that in the future. But this is just information. This is just where we're at today. That number 1. So it's only the figures in bold type that are confirmed at this point in time.
Right. So we've got a few questions in. Oh, sorry, Colin.
Yeah, I was going to rattle through. There's a couple of questions on here, so I want to couch this as a proposal. So I think in terms of the recruitment of the board, I I think I would just make the statement that it should be the majority of people on the board should live in Stanley, but not exclusively. So, for example, you might get a donor from who was born in Stanley and wants to donate some money back in, and might want to put a representative on the or want to be on the grant giving body. But I think it's important that we've got the majority of people who are making decisions about the money are from the local area. I think that I would agree with the statement on there that it should be an open recruitment process that the town council should be part of for all of the positions on the board. And I'm comfortable with the fact that town council would have 3 places on that grant given committee as well, and we can review them annually, and I would suggest they go in as part of the AGM every year with the other positions that we have. I think in terms of the rolling programme of once we've put an initial call out for projects, the board would meet every couple of months. I'm comfortable with that, and I would recommend that the council or move that the council approve that. In terms of the funding limits, I'm happy with the suggested limits, although I would add in that any exceptional projects that make a significant contribution or impact to the local area that are above the 10,000 upper limit should be considered or could be considered by the committee. I think that, you know, if for example we end up getting a World Cup qualifier up at Anfield playing, you know, the town council might want to consider using this fund to contribute towards that. So I think the word significant and exceptional put a bit of an understanding on there to any applicants that we wouldn't be expecting somebody to apply to the fund for what would be a usual project. It would have to be something exceptional and significant. So I would make that suggestion. I would say that regeneration should be included, because I think the term regeneration covers quite a lot of work that's going on around the area at the minute. It could be physical or it could be social, and I think that it's a term that the public in Stanley are familiar with. So I think yes, it should be included. I think also the issue with play areas, and I think I'll couch the play area issue and the regeneration issue with some language as well that they might want to include as part of the criteria. And I would suggest that we use the term legally deliverable. This would stop people, for example, trying to put play areas in that wasn't on their land, that they didn't have planning permission for, and things like that. So at the point of application, the project needs to be legally deliverable. And I think as well, I would add into that that it needs to be sustainable, and they need to have a viable plan for any longer term maintenance or liabilities. So add that language in, and I would suggest we put that back to the Community Foundation, which gives them a couple of caveats to box off any applications that come forward there. But certainly with play areas, I know there's various projects that have been worked up around the place, and it might be we want to add value to them, and local groups might want to apply to this fund to have a bigger and better facility. And I think the only, so I would move that. I think that I note that within the report that the County Durham Community Foundations apply to Department for Community, Culture, Media and Sport, and for some additional funds to come into the fund, which again would add value and help. Albeit that will be for 2 years, it doesn't mean that we're restricted. That's that would add value to what's currently there at the minute, and also the lottery fund as well. And I know that when they came, they spoke when they did the presentation to council about this being quite innovative, because it's a geographical, a sort of geographical area-based grant, which would be something a little bit new to what they and fresh from what they do at the minute. So I would note that, but I think that as a town council we should be making this commitment for 3 years, and then if we've got the break clauses in that's suggested within the report, if for whatever reason something goes wrong, it gives us the option to pull that money back in-house if we need to. But I think we should be looking to commit for the 3 years. I think what that allows us to do is to build on the additional money that's already been secured, and I notice that the town council money, for every pound the town council's put in, we've also pulled in a pound from elsewhere as well. So there's a lot more money going to be available to the local community already, and I think that was what we'd hoped when we started talking to the Community Foundation about this. So I hope that we can start looking at building that endowment that they spoke about, so some of that funding is there in perpetuity for years to come. So ease of access, which we know the Community Foundation have off to a T. It's one of the simplest, most grassroots levels of funding available to people, and I think the value for money, I think we should be approving with the recommendations I previously made, approve this for a term of 3 years with the great clauses. I formally propose that, Chair.
Does anybody else want to come in? Got a second if the calls, if everybody's happy with it, I would say second that. Everybody in agreement?
One point on that,
Yeah.
when we put the publicity out on this, what we said was we'd take it to the annual meeting
Yeah.
of the council, and that's when we won't put it out now, although it is being recorded and we've agreed it. I think we need to get a bit more publicity out of it, and the people that are involved also need to be publicity. So annual meetings, the time to put that out.
Let's do it. We'll move on to item number 10, flexi time policy, which is attachment L.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, this is one of the actions that came out of the policy group. There was a number of policies which we are working through. The decision of the group, which was supported by the council, was that we would look to localise and adopt Durham County Council HR frameworks, because that's the approach that we took during the restructuring process, and we retained DCC's HR for HR advice. We know that the local trade unions are used to working against DCC policies, so there's a lot of synergies there, and there's no real need to do anything massively different. So there's a number of policies which were on the minutes for that, which will be coming through over the next month or so. The flexi time policy being the first one out of that little batch of policies which we have looked at localising, and it's basically it's put forward to the committee to consider whether they would like to implement it, or if not, what to do instead.
Thanks, Alan. Does anybody want to come? I thought Nancy was coming in. Sorry. Yeah.
You know how we said we're going to standardise down to the 724 per day hours? You know where you've got the flexi credit and the debit, are you going to change that to the day and a half, like equivalent, like the 1106 and the 724, because it's got 11 hours and 730 hours?
Oh, in the policy?
Yeah.
Oh, right, okay. Well spotted, because I hadn't spotted that.
Mr. Cutting Pierce.
We are localising DCC's policies. I'm not cutting and pasting, I'm just changing what's there. But, yeah. Right.
Anybody else want to comment on this one, David?
Yeah, I don't know how we've got the flexi time policy here today, because what we really need to get the formal performance framework in place for managers first, before we start talking about flexi time. We need to get appraisal systems in, we need to get everything organised before we can even look at this, because unless your performance is being monitored right, then how can you agree flexi? And I would move that we defer this, take it off the agenda, get the other policies that we asked for. There was 3 key policies, I seem to recall, that we'd asked for. They haven't come here yet, and we need to get those and get the other side right, because and if I want to be blunt, when I've always been a senior manager, when I've been a senior manager, I've never been on flexi. You did the hours that was required to do the job, and so it's so for so few of the staff to be involved in this. I don't think there's a need to progress it quickly. Sometimes we do, but not till everything else is in place.
Thanks, David. David, on this side?
Yeah, well, I understood when the recruitment and all the posts were being changed, everyone said according to the flexi time policy, which we didn't have. So that's why I thought we've got to have it, because it actually says on the. So I don't know how we can defer it, maybe we can, but if that's the position they were given was subject to the flexi time, you know what I mean, and the recruitment. So I think we've got to go through with it.
Thanks. Carl, do you want to come in next?
I was just going to say there must be a flexi time policy there at the minute, even if it's not a written one. There must be something that something happens.
Yeah.
So, you know, I don't know if somebody works longer hours, they must get an hour off the next morning, or you know, there's got to be a way that that's worked out. You know, we've been sort of, I've been involved here for a couple of years now, and I would expect there must be some way. You're not going to expect staff, and it's probably wrong for us to be talking about it in front of them, to be fair. But I think if you're expecting staff to work extra hours, and I'm sure there's a way that they take that back in a minute. I think the issue I have with this is exactly that David's outlined. That for me, it's the performance management framework that sits behind this, and I must admit, it petrifies me the lack of management structures within this organisation since I've come in here, and we've seen countless times where things have come off the rails because of a lack of a management structure in one shape or form. And I don't want to go into detail about that because I don't think it's the time or the place, but I'm more than happy to sit down with any of the staff and talk through some of the issues I have around performance management. And I think that for me, getting that framework in place underneath is absolutely vital. It needs to be there. There needs to be a management structure with clear lines of accountability, clear work plans for the staff, clear sort of targets that are then monitored and actioned, that should, in my view, link to the performance and the workload of the council, which we've done a lot of work in setting. So for me, and this isn't about dissing any of the work of any of the staff at any level within the council, I think that wider policy framework needs to be in place first. Otherwise, how do we manage this? You know, if we haven't got a handle on the workload of the staff, we're in effect with this at the minute. I think we're signing off, you know, the ability for people, and I'm not saying staff would, but we're signing off as councillors here. We're willingly signing off the ability for staff within the council to accrue a load of overtime without actually knowing what work's being done and what's not being done, or without any accountability for that work being done. So for me, that framework that sits underneath is absolutely vital, and this is part of that framework. So I'm not saying we'll forget about this indefinitely, but I think that framework needs to be worked up within the policy review group and then come back as a package with all of the performance management framework within that. And that, sorry, just to finish, that'll then hopefully alleviate some of the problems that certainly I've witnessed over the past couple of years.
Thanks, Carl. Joanne?
Yeah, performance frameworks need to be looked at, but I'm thinking we've come this far with this policy, and it's quite a simple thing to implement. You're formalising what is being worked now anyway. It's a formalisation for any new entrant that comes in. You've got that policy there then, if we agree on this now. We've come this far to agree it. There's only a couple of things, in my opinion, need to be changed, like the day and a half and the day. But apart from that, it's a standard working flexi policy that you would find anywhere. We're not allowing people to accrue a load of overtime. If you would accrue a day, you would only be able to take that time off within that 4-week working period. So, like I say, you've come this far for it. If we're getting new entrants in, they need to have some kind of policy there. We can concentrate, definitely. If you move this on now, then you can definitely concentrate then on the performance management side of things, which is, you know, a lot bigger and a lot more harder than what this flexi working time policy is.
Well, I made a motion that we defer this, and there's a couple of reasons for deferring it. One is we really need that performance management in. The other is this should have been on Part B. It shouldn't have been on the general. I'm talking about staff here, I'm talking about people, I'm talking about their conditions, and we shouldn't discuss that in the public arena. If you want me to quote where this council's gone wrong, and where I've seen flexi time go wrong, and payment for extra payments because flexi time they've been overworking, and since I came on the council, sometimes it was hundreds of pounds we had to pay because people couldn't get the time off. Now, I don't want to discuss that in here. I feel more comfortable discussing it somewhere else in Part B. But for the time being, I think we really need to get the performance framework in and appraisal systems and things like that. They were the three policies we asked for. They were the three that were the clerk was told to build up and bring forward. I don't know where this flexi time policy came from. You say it's on the agenda, but I don't know where it came from. I'd never heard about it until it was put on the agenda, and I think we should defer it.
I second that.
Thank you. Alan, do you want to come in?
I'll just explain where it came from, if I may. It came from the policy group, which put forward its work programme, which was signed off by council, and it was on the work programme for the policy group. That's where it's come from. And as Councillor Tully said, the reason it's come first is because it's a very simple policy to localise, and the others, as everyone has agreed, are more complex and need more work. That's the only reason it's on the agenda. I wouldn't have done it otherwise.
So has this gone? Has this policy's been knocked around within the policy subgroup before it's come back here?
This was recommended that for adoption by the policy group, but the policy group also said they wanted to localise DCC policies, and it is a standard policy.
So this hasn't. Sorry. So just to clarify, Alan,
It hasn't been back to the policy.
hasn't been back to the policy group. They haven't signed it off. I suggest we put it to the vote, and then we knock it back to the policy group, and then get it back on the agenda with that performance framework round it.
Right, we've got a motion on the table to defer the policy until it's been to the policy working group. All in favour, please? You can stick your hands up again if you're in favour of deferment.
Yeah, that's carried.
Yeah, that's everything. Right.
Alan, do you want to just...
We've got 3 jumpers on, man. We've had these proper sweat. We're freezing here. Is it freezing? Let's see.
A good job, Bonus, who's sitting across here.
Okay, right. I'll switch the heater off, so we'll move on to item number 11, Stanley Town Council Events Programme, which is attachment M. The initial meeting was held on the 29th of January. Committees asked to consider the report and decide, and then there's a huge list, so I'll leave that down.
Thank you. Yeah, hopefully members have had the opportunity to read the notes from the events meeting that took place. I'll start with the easy one, which is play in the park. I know it's second on the list, but we basically first on the decision, second on the report. Sorry, we basically looked to replicate the programme from last year. Obviously, the dates have changed slightly. We had a discussion in relation to View Lane Park. As members will be aware, that there's been a multi-use games area built on the site recently, which has reduced the size of the usable space, and there were always other problems with the site. It has poor drainage. It's very difficult for vehicular access. It's a nice park, but it has got issues, and it's also very close to Oakey's Park. And the group thought it would be advisable or a good plan to maybe spread them out a little bit, and one area which has not had its own event has been the north of the parish, and it was suggested that Tantoby Cricket Club might be a good location to hold an event instead of at View Lane Park. Alan has been in touch with Tantoby Cricket Club, and they'd be delighted to have an event on their field. So the proposal would be, because in the original scheme of events which is attached to this, the last page with the dates in it, we were suggesting that the play in the park at View Lane or possibly Tanfield would take place on 31st of July, and then the other events we would replicate the dates effectively that we had them last year. Tantoby Cricket Club would not be available on the 31st of July. They have another event there. So we're suggesting, if Tantoby is acceptable to members, switching the Craighead and the Tantoby event. So the Craighead one takes place first and the Tantoby one takes place last. And otherwise the programme will be the same. So that's a consideration.
So rather than get into a whole discussion then people have to try to remember where.
Yep.
So, does anybody want to come in this one? Anybody want to comment about trying Tantoli Cricket Club instead of View Lane Park?
Well, yeah, I think it's a good idea.
Oh, George. Yeah. Christine, then Carl.
I just have to say I think it's a cracking idea because people couldn't see what was going on, and it was sad that a lot of people didn't know what was happening, and you know, it's just really sad that people cannot get to it as well. If you don't know if you don't know how to get there, it's a problem.
Okay. Carl.
I was just going to say, I think from a practical point of view, I think View Lane Park, it's difficult access, but I think Tantoli Cricket Club, View Lane at least, was a fairly central venue to Stanley, which is the most sustainable part of the town in terms of transport and get access. And I think that I just wonder what other venues have been considered before they've got a Tantoli Cricket Club, because obviously we've got an abundance of areas. You've got, you know, a lot of space up at North Durham Academy, playing fields, open space next door as well, with really good access, walking access straight into town centre. You've got you've got the park down at Oakies as well, which is a massive space. I know we already run some play in the parks there, but what thoughts been given about running more there? Because I know that that's one of our busiest play in the park events. So I just think I'm not happy that all of the other venues around the area have been properly considered, and I don't know whether it's worth asking the group that's met just to consider some of the other potential sites in the area. Tantoli Cricket Club, you know, for anyone living in South Stanley, is going to be the most unaccessible place ever.
We've got one at Oakies. We've got one at Craigieburn. The last year, and what we put forward this year, is Craigieburn and Green, Oakies.
Yeah, Alan, sorry, I don't know, you must have been able to hear us properly. What I said was, have we considered putting on extra events at Oakies on top of the one that's already on? Because I know that it's one of the busiest and one of the most popular of all the play in the parks.
We haven't considered that.
That was my point.
Sorry, I misheard you.
Christine.
Can I make a suggestion about the Anfield playing one? I know that I want to put in for that one as well.
Yeah.
It was on a Saturday and people would prefer to have it midweek, Wednesday. Just what was relayed back to me.
Okay. Alan, got any thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I'm
an expert.
no, this is I'm not an expert. This is what is on the agenda for to discuss. We've always ran them on Wednesdays and Saturdays, simply to get the events in over the course of the summer holidays, because obviously there aren't enough Wednesdays to do them all midweek. The first couple of years when we had the Saturdays and Anfield playing, they were very busy, and we had a washout there one year. I think the last year maybe wasn't as busy as some other years, but really, you know, this is a proposal. This is for members to decide where they want these events. If members would like them to be organised midweek, then we'll organise them midweek if they think that's the way to go.
Hang on 2 seconds. I've just remembered that. Can you tell Carl which of the venues you considered before deciding to go to Tantoli as well? Because I forgot about that.
Well, to be honest, we didn't consider a repeat in Oakies Park. What we looked at was the spread over the parish, and obviously with an event in Anfield Plain, an event in South North, an event at Craighead, we felt that we covered that bottom sweep of the town. Then we had one, obviously at Oakies, and you know, if you look at them on a map, obviously Oakies and Shield Row are very close together. I accept Carl's point that in terms of the concentration of population, that is probably the most populated area of the town. But we just looked to try and spread them further. Tantoli Cricket Club came up because in Tanfield Lea there's not really a suitable site. There's lots of woods and stuff down there. Tanfield Village is small. Tantoli has quite a large catchment area because you've got Whitehead there, Clouding. It's not far from Tanfield Village. It's accessible from Tanfield Lea. So that's why we put it forward. It was, you know, and it was a discussion meeting that we had obviously with officers. Councillor Davidson was there, and also our contractors were there. So between us, we sort of put it forward as a suitable proposal. And obviously, if members want us to go and look at something else, then we'll look at something else.
Carl, what's one?
To come back, there's a cricket club within 500 yards of View Lane Park was probably the underlying reason behind my question. So if there is going to be an event in that vicinity, you've got another cricket club, you know, in Beamish and East Stanley Cricket Club that's within 500 yards of View Lane Park. There's a small footpath links the two together on both sides of it. I just didn't know whether that had been considered. I'm not convinced that putting it at Tantobi Cricket Club is the best place. That's my personal opinion, and I would just like I'd like the other venues to be considered before we make a final decision on it. And whether you go away and speak to Alan Hillary, you know, you might go and speak to the people at the academy or the people at East Stanley Cricket Club, and they might just say, "Oh, we don't want you on." But it would just seem that if people are used to an event in the Shield Row area, the cricket club at Beamish and East Stanley, or even Shield Row School at the bottom of the bank, might be a much better location for an event. Because there would have been, I'm guessing there's a reason why the event was originally held in View Lane Park. So my initial reaction would be to try and find another suitable venue close to View Lane Park.
It was originally put on View Lane Park because Mary put it on.
I know, yeah.
That was the only reason at the time. Yeah.
Stephen wants to come back in.
Is it not possible to put, because Carl had mentioned before putting extras, so perhaps it could be East Stanley Cricket Club, Tantobi Cricket Club, and maybe somewhere else, stick an extra one in.
Got a budget though, haven't we? We've got a budget envelope, so whatever it is, got to be within that, hasn't it?
As long as it is within budget, separate them all out.
James, do you want to come in?
Yeah, my only concern in regards to separating them out would we still get the quality of what we have within budget? My gut would say no, because we'd have to spread the budget over more events. So it would mean they would have to reduce the quality of the events.
That is true.
What about if we look for outside funding as well, to add to it? Just an idea.
Carl wants to come back in yet again, then I've got to one.
Yeah, just to try and move this on a bit, I think if that group's been looking at it, my view would be just to try and quicken this agenda item up, that we kick this back to the group to look at the other venues and what the options and costs associated with it would be, and come back with a proposal. But I do think you should be considering the other venues adjacent to View Lane Park. I mean, in terms of the other proposed recommendations in there, I don't have any problem with them, but I think we should maybe get some members on this group, this events group with you, Mark, to try and add some value, in particular at the Minor Sunday event, which is a new event. So I'd like to propose that Lewis and Jack, certainly from our side, got involved with you on that, alongside what I've already said about the actual location for that event. And then I'm happy to approve the other recommendation for the allocation of funds for the display of the banner in the Civic Hall, and for the banner groups as well. If anyone wants to second that, I'm going to quicken the agenda up with it.
Can I just ask the question and take a step back to Tantobi, that it would be held on the playing fields next to the cricket pitch, and it wouldn't be on the cricket pitch itself? I don't know if Shield Row Cricket Club has playing fields next to it, but does it? Right.
Yeah, I haven't done site visits to either site,
Right.
to be honest. We had a meeting last week, on the 29th of January, where we talked about this. We've reported it through to yourselves. We've got a meeting on Friday. So obviously your feedback will go straight back into that group on Friday, and we'll take that forward.
Right. We had a proposal. I think David and James both had their hands up. We'll bring James in first.
It was just a formal second.
Alright. Second call for proposal. David?
Yeah, been a bit through, you know, I mean, I never knew we were talking about changing the Craighead date. I would rather know what that date is and see what else is on in the community. We're quite sure it's not going to look good in the community groups. We're quite sure it's not going to interfere with anything later on, before we talk about changing the date of it.
Helen?
Just seeing as we're jumping about now, the one about the allocation for the banner groups, do we know how the money would be allocated to each each of the banner groups, would it be divided up equally or would
We haven't sorted that out yet, that's just a plan. But I suspect obviously one day one more than another, so. Right, does anybody else want to come in? Because Col seems to have covered everything in the world after taking up all day talking about Clontarf Creek. Is everybody happy with the solution for number one, which is explore a few more venues and see if
obviously if the Tantobi Cricket Club is not being used, there's no reason to change the date of the Craighead event, which answers Councillor Marshall's point,
yeah.
because it was only considered switching because of the commitment to Tantobi Cricket Club, so there would be no need for that to change.
And then we've got item number 3 about the banner groups, and item number 4 about the funding. Carl added a bit on about getting some extra councillors on the group.
He did move that Councillor Palace and Councillor Christie went onto that group.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyone from the independents want to go on that group?
Right, you've got all, the first meeting's on Friday, so you've got on Friday, I suppose.
Yeah, no worries. I'll go on, yeah.
George. Right.
Make numbers up, I thought he would.
Okay, so everybody's happy with that? We'll move on to item number 12, committee actions update, which is attachment N. I'll hand over to Alan if there's any excitement in this one.
Not especially. The only two things that are outstanding are the defibrillator, which has been on for some time now.
We can't be eating that before you get that.
Hang on. The DWP had created a work order for the electrics to be done last week, which they weren't. They should be done this week. So there is some movement on this finally. So I would want to. Well, yeah. Unfortunately, it's the DWP.
Daniel Brick.
So there is some movement on that. We are hoping that the electrical supply will be in very soon, and then we will obviously get the thing bolted onto that as quick as we possibly can and get it put into the system and get some people trained. Obviously, it's right next to Pack House, so and that's open 7 days a week, so you will obviously start there with the first responders and work your way around from there. The other action that's outstanding is from November, which is to set up a steering group to look at environmental projects. We haven't done that yet. We need to do that.
Anybody, Jordan, you got something?
I was asking why didn't we put it on Packed House in the first place?
Because Packed House says no issue.
Give him more responsibility.
That's why.
Does anybody? Oh no. Come on.
It's not even on this, it's on probably an item of, it was when someone mentioned Packed House, that it was just to throw it in as an area for the clerk to explore really. That obviously we had some success with the Just Women's Centre with purchasing that property, and I just wanted to know whether the clerk would maybe do some investigatory work and bring it back to this group initially on whether or not it would be more financially advantageous for the council to look at the purchase of the building that Packed House is in, rather than spending the next 15 years or however long paying 15 grand a year rent or whatever the rental amount is. Because
We've got by the one next to it.
I'm just saying it might be worth having a look at the options with all of that, because I'd rather be paying money into something that we were going to own at the end of it than lacing the pockets of a private landlord who's not looking after the property properly.
I'm happy to do that if
Joanne?
Just a quick question. I know it's not on here anymore because I've moved it up, but have we heard anything about police cars being purchased yet?
Yes. Okay, you're not right, it's not on that list, but obviously this is basically as of when did they come in? Yesterday. As of yesterday, I'm informed that both the vehicles are at the Durham Conservatory workshops having stickers and transfers put on them. And it's just a question of Dave sorting out codes and access into police buildings and stuff, the local operation. They're basically, they're there, they've been delivered, they're being badged up. So, imminent. And as soon as I know, I will obviously send an email around to everybody and notify you. Because we will obviously want to do some publicity around
Yeah.
to publicise the fact that we're supporting the local
They are
police team.
finally here.
Yeah. So they are in the county.
They're doing their camp.
They're no longer in France being built. They're here.
Got you.
Has anybody else got anything on this item? That's great, we'll close the meeting, thanks very much for attending, we'll see you all again next
Can I ask
next
Alan,
meeting.
the cinema that I saw on Tuesday, did you find out, have you arranged to put it on tonight? So members can see?
Unfortunately, I was unable to arrange that because we've only got one member of staff trained to use it because it was only installed yesterday. And that member of staff isn't working today. But what James said to me was that he would arrange in the next week or so, he would basically get a time where we can get something, basically shows a demonstration so that members can come in and see the equipment being used.
I'm disappointed that I asked you on Tuesday and you said yes, you could arrange that tonight. And the reason was, there's so much goes behind that. We've put it on Facebook, we haven't had a proper launch, we've been asked questions that we should have the answers to.
Yep.
We should have had a discussion about what we're going to put on that theatre, what type of shows we're going to do, what nights, where it's going to be. We should have all those answers ready to go out. Now we're getting asked on Facebook what's happening. So I'm disappointed that we're not going to be able to see it, and then we're going to have to give more time to come in to see it especially. It is professional, it is good, I'm quite pleased with it, but I think we can make it a success for the people of Stanley. It would be nice to have seen it tonight.
Thank you very much.